My first memories of my father-in-law are very, very intimate to me. Dr. Barnabas Sanyalo Oloruntaba was a great man. He was a man who was a father to me. He was a mentor, a hero, a companion, a great friend of mine. And so his passing away is a great loss for me personally. It's a big void that will be very impossible to fill. And so I can't even explain in words the extent of my own personal loss and Dr. Oloruntaba, my father-in-law's passing away. My first memory of Dad was, I had come to see him in Ilorin in 1981. I had just finished my university. I wanted to marry his daughter, so I came to see him at home. And he had gone to Rome, and he went to FAO in Rome. He had just come back. And, being a man that was so well respected, so well known, and I come from a very, very low income family, and I wasn't sure how I was going to be received and how I was going to be, how the conversation was going to go. So there was a big gap between where I come from and him. But I was surprised. He just called me up. He said, "Come up to the study." I went up to his study. He and I sat down, and he received me. He's a man who doesn't discriminate based on your age. He doesn't discriminate based on your economic status. And we sat down, we discussed quite a lot. I was very free. I was like at home completely. He didn't intimidate me, even though he was former Federal Permanent Secretary of Agriculture. I was just this lowly little person who just finished his bachelor's, who had the audacity to come to his house to come and ask that I was going to marry his daughter. What job did I have? And but the conversation went very well, very, very respectful. Dad is always like that, very humble, very meek, very gentle. And I remember that we forgot the reason why I came, because he and I started talking about agriculture and agriculture and agriculture. And after almost an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, Mom came up and said, "Haven't you people finished talking yet?" And Dad said, "Well, what exactly is it that we are supposed to discuss?" I said, "Sorry, sir, I came here to ask for your hand of your daughter in marriage." Oh, he said, "That's it, and I enjoy your career in agriculture, your passion for agriculture." He said, "Approved, that's fine." And that was how my love for agriculture, that I shared very much with Dad, helped me to marry Yemisi Grace, my wife. My second memory of my father-in-law was, I got a scholarship to go to the United States from the university, and one of my professors, they had worked all kinds of things, sometimes to make sure my scholarship was taken away from me actually and given to somebody else based on other criteria that was not from the university. And it was about the last week for me to go to the States, so I felt so down, I felt so angry, I felt so disappointed. And I came to him at home and I said, "Dad, they just took my scholarship away for no reason." And actually the person who took the scholarship away happened to be a consultant, a professor, a dean, working for him in his firm, B.S. Oloruntaba and Partners. And I said, "Dad, they just took my scholarship away. And so you have to fire this person who was working for you as a consultant, because this professor actually took my scholarship away." And I was surprised. He looked at me and he said, "Son, life's like that. I want you to be strong. What God is going to do, God is going to do. Don't worry about it." I said, "But aren't you going to fire the person I asked you to fire?" He said, "Son, I'll teach you another lesson. I hired him for his intellectual competence, for his ability to help me on the project that we're working on. Let's separate the two. I just know God is going to take care of you." Here am I today. I'm president of the African Development Bank, and God took care of me. So those two things I learned from him: respect, decency, humility, and have faith in others. Oh, what kind of person, how will I describe my late father-in-law? When I married his daughter, I told him I was going to be his son, that I wasn't going to be a son-in-law to him. And he and I was very, very close. And he was my father to the very end. How will I describe my father-in-law? He was a very loving man. He was a very caring man. He loved everyone. He forgave everything. There's nothing you can do that he couldn't forgive. He was a man who didn't discriminate. He never discriminated. It doesn't matter your religion. It doesn't matter your upbringing. It doesn't matter your economic status. That had time for every single person. And sometimes I will look at him. We will be going out and the way he treated his drivers, the way he treated his junior workers working for him, there was no difference. All I can say is that Dad was just an epitome of integrity. He was a man who was very humane. He was known as a man of integrity. The day that I married his daughter at the wedding, I just came out of the church, and there was one of the guests who had actually been one of his people who had worked with him. He walked up to me, and that was 1984. He just called me aside. He said, "Young man." I said, "Yes." He said, "You're a very, very lucky man." I said, "What do you mean, sir?" He said, "To marry Dr. Olorontoba's daughter, you're a very lucky man, because he's a very, very good man. He's a very, very honest man, a man of integrity." Everywhere I went, everybody talked about him as a man of integrity. Very, very honest, did everything the right way. That was just an example of just the kind of person I wanted to be. How will I say life lessons I learned from Dad? I would say the first life lesson I learned from Dad is to live a godly life. He was a man who put God first in every single thing that he did. You see, it doesn't matter what position that we are in life, God put us there for a reason, for a purpose. And God, Dad lived like that. He was a man who was the Federal Permanent Secretary of Agriculture in Nigeria. In those days, the Federal Permanent Secretary of Agriculture were more powerful than ministers. I became a minister later in Nigeria. Permanent secretaries were so powerful, they used to call them super permanent secretaries. They were very powerful people. But Dad had a way that he carried himself. Very, very simple. You will never know at all. And so I learned from him a lot about humility. I learned a lot about him about, loving others, caring for others. I learned a lot from him about not carrying your position on your shoulders. God put you there. Never forget that. How will I describe Dad's role in agriculture? As somebody who later became Federal Permanent Secretary of Agriculture myself, I actually feel so little compared to him because every single thing that I did as Federal Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria was simply building on the work of this great man. When he was Director of Agriculture in Nigeria, he was the first Director of Agriculture of Nigeria. He did amazing things. He later became Federal Permanent Secretary of Agriculture. Many of the research institutions in Nigeria were built by him. The agricultural development projects in Nigeria that led to a huge amount of food production in Nigeria were all established by him. You look at the river basin authorities to harness all the waters in Nigeria were all done by him. The International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, one of the global centers for agriculture, he was one of the people that actually facilitated that, and he became his first vice chairman of the board of IITA. And so this was a man that's done so much, and yet you will never see him praise himself. You will see him always so self-effacing, doesn't really want to talk much about himself. And really, in many ways, I see him as the father of Nigerian agriculture. And so when I was appointed by President Jonathan as Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria, I remember going to him and I asked Dad, I said, "Dad, please give me some advice as I become the Minister of Agriculture for Nigeria." And he looked at me of all the things that he could have told me. He could have told me about science, technology, institutions, how to build them, and all that. He didn't tell me any of those. He said, "I will just tell you a simple lesson, which if you keep, it will help you." I said, "What's that lesson, Dad?" He said, "It's called the story of the frogs." So he told me this story. He said, there are all this family of frogs, and they were all climbing a very tall pole. And they would climb it, and many of them would fall down, and everybody was scared. What will happen if you fell off this very tall pole? But then there was one frog, and that frog continued to rise and rise and rise and went to the very top of that pole. And so when this frog was coming down, he said, the family of frogs were all screaming, "What if you fall down from there?" Well, the frog made it down to the bottom of the pole. And then when all this family of frogs were all screaming at it, then they realized the frog was a deaf frog. The lesson he told me was that whatever you see in life that you set your heart on, close your ears, trust in God, focus on it, and you'll get it done. I can never forget that. Well, why do I think Dad was pioneering and exemplary. You know, to succeed in agriculture, the first thing you have to do is to love the people you're working for. He loved farmers. He was a man who loved to be in the farm and the fields, and the lives of people meant so much to him. You know, he built institutions for Nigeria well ahead of time. So when I became minister, sometimes I would turn around and look at these institutions. I said, what if this visionary man didn't build these institutions? What will I be doing as minister of agriculture? I thank God for what we were able to do when I was minister of agriculture. But I was standing on my father-in-law's very, very broad shoulders. And the commitment and the selfless way in which he served Nigeria, it was no surprise to me, and I was very delighted when President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan made him one of the 100 Nigerians, distinguished Nigerians, that he decorated at the 100th anniversary of Nigeria. That's a great honor for a man that is so simple, for a man that was so committed, for a man that is so focused, who loved everybody, for a man that served his country to the end. I mean, it was just so amazing, Dad, what you've done. And I can only hope that I become half of you. What will I add, Dad? I just want to end by saying thank you. Thank you very much for your life, and thank God for your life. Thank you for accepting me as your son. Thank you for supporting me so big and being there for our grandchildren. You loved everyone. Thank you for life lessons that I learned. Thank you for the lessons about humility, about integrity. Thank you for the lessons about the frog, which I will never forget. I've told everybody about this issue of this frog, Dad. And the other thing that I can never forget was as you slept on that bed, and it was a dying bed, I was next to you and I held your hands and we were talking. Your strength was gone, your voice was gone, you couldn't tell to anybody. And as I held your hand, I told you about the fact that as president of the African Development Bank, I think we can feed Africa. And we're working very hard on it. And with your lifeless body, I didn't know where the strength came from for you, but you just squeezed my hands as if to say, son, don't forget the lesson of the frogs. Go get it done. Thank you, Dad. I'll miss you.